December 17th, 2011, we received the PS Vita. Now we're going to go ahead and break down the hardware. First, we have the 1000 model and the 2000 model. Me personally, I have a 2000 model, and I did have a 1000 back in the day, but that's another thing where it's just like, in the last couple years, I was like, hey, I want to pick up a 2000. So that's the one that I rock mainly. A couple deviations between the two are the reason why I prefer the 2000. So first off, the 1000, the back pad on the back, it's way too big. You end up touching it, and the grips are a lot smaller. So sometimes it's just, I don't know. It's one of those. It's very subjective. Some people find the 1000 to be more comfortable. Some people think the 2000 is more comfortable. Me, I fall into the 2000 camp. The 1000 does technically have an OLED, but it's not like the same OLEDs that you would get on modern displays. It's a bit of an older OLED, so there's that. There's also some infamous issues with GPU crashes with the 1000, which isn't very fun. There's also sometimes screen artifacting in very dark screens, which it never affects gameplay, but it has been noted. If you kind of search into it a bit, there's some screen artifacting that can happen there. There's no internal storage, which means if you ever try to mod or homebrew the thing, there's a bit more that you have to do there. It's not too overly complicated, but still, it's just an extra step that you don't really feel like doing. Oh, and did I mention how big the back pad is? Yeah, I know that I mentioned it twice, but dude, on that 1000, I can't tell you how many times I was trying to play games and I ended up doing things I wasn't actually trying to do just because it was so big. But on this, it's in a reasonable place, way far away from the grips. It actually makes sense on this one. Not to mention the 1000 also has a proprietary charging port, which for me personally, you can get the third-party whatevers all you want, but I don't know, man. If I'm gonna get a proprietary thing, I would prefer to get first-party, just so then I know it's legit. It's all good. But obviously with it being proprietary from a longevity perspective, obviously those are only going to be in circulation or be working for so long, so you have to rely on third-party stuff, and sometimes that stuff can be hit or miss. So with the 2000, obviously you just get that straight up that micro USB port. And overall, I don't know, I just always kind of prefer the sleek look of the 2000. Oh, and not to mention again with the whole OLED thing we were talking about earlier, I hate overly saturated colors, and the PS Vita 1000 doesn't necessarily look overly saturated, but the colors are still just a bit too much for me and my brain sometimes, so I just prefer LCDs. That's me. Some people are going to clown on me for that, but I always prefer LCD over OLED. The PS Vita was basically just the PSP, but, just every complaint that anybody ever had about the PSP resolved. So, the analog sticks, there's two of them. I was going to list something else off, but yeah, that was literally the only complaint anybody ever had about the PSP, because the PSP was a perfect system as it was, but yeah, seriously. The PS Vita, I'm literally at a loss for words. This system is so amazing, whether you mod it, whether you don't. It's fully backwards compatible with the PSP, so if you can't afford, if it's again the 2DS or the 3DS, if you have to choose between one of them, I say get a PS Vita, just because it's backwards compatible, so you can play all that stuff there. You can play PS1 games. If you homebrew it, there's so many emulators you can get. We're not even going to go into it right now. The library is absolutely amazing. Not to mention, we were getting PS3 level games on this thing. No, it's not just oh, the graphics look like PS. No, you were literally getting PS3 games on this thing. We saw things like Borderlands 2, Resident Evil Revelations 2, PlayStation All-Stars, Marvel vs. Combat, Street Fighter X Tekken, it goes on and on. There was literally, Need for Speed Most Wanted, that was insane to see on here. And then there was other games which were PS3 level, but, again, they were just dedicated handheld games, which is one of the things that I really wanted to drive home with this video, is I miss when, these handhelds just kind of had, dedicated games made for them that just weren't being shared with consoles, because you were getting, unique experiences, and there was just always fun quirks and things about them where it was just there was something special about those unique experiences. But we got a lot of unique experiences still on the PS Vita. We got a lot of the handheld versions of the Lego games, all the versions on here. None of them were the console versions. They were the handheld versions, which is fine, because I would argue that these were the best versions of those handheld versions graphically and just, in terms of all that stuff. But we also got games like Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified, which is actually a lot of fun. Resistance Burning Skies, Uncharted Golden Abyss, which Uncharted Golden Abyss is always one of my go-to games where if somebody asked me hey, why should I get a Vita? What's so special about it? What is this thing capable of? Uncharted Golden Abyss. That is one of my go-tos. And you had a lot of other innovative titles that use the PS Vita in unique ways, like Tearaway, for example. Always loved that game. Reality Fighters. And you had a lot of underrated gems, specifically that come to mind, Resogun. That's just one of my favorite, first-party Sony games, where it's hey, man, this is a first-party Sony game, and somehow nobody ever talks about this. Resogun's absolutely amazing. Super Stardust, I absolutely love that game. And there's so many amazing games for the Vita. My brain is literally blanking just because there's so we had like a spin-off Assassin's Creed 3 game on here, literally like open world there. Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate, which was like a 2.5D Arkham game. Literally had Dead or Alive 5 on here, which funnily enough, that was actually the way that I played this the game story mode for the first time. I played it on here. Mortal Kombat 9, we had that on here. Injustice. Unfortunately though, this system was not supported long term in terms of first party support, as you guys probably know, and it's ironic. PS Vita means life, and well, as far as first-party support is concerned, that life wasn't very long-lasting because Sony didn't maintain support for it for very long just because it wasn't selling that well. So after the first couple years, after we got some amazing first-party titles, like some of the ones that I listed, you know, like Killzone Mercenary as well, that's another one where I point to, I'm like, that's what the PS Vita is capable of. You know, they just kind of dropped support and it was left to the indies. But hey, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that because we got a lot of great indie games and just smaller budget titles, and just the library there is also amazing for the system. You got stuff like Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, which is one of my favorite Metroidvanias of all time. Then you got amazing visual novels like Root Letter. That, oh my gosh, if you haven't played Root Letter before, if you haven't heard of it, I'd highly recommend that. Then we got other games on here. Like, there's so many great RPGs and JRPGs and ports of, oh, that's another thing I forgot to talk about. We got so many like collections on here, like PS2 collections, like the Jak and Daxter collection, the God of War collection, the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, the Sly collection, Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, which again was literally a PS3 game. And there's just like the library for this thing. I could just go on and on because for as little first-party support as it got, for the first-party support it actually got, it was genuinely amazing. And even once that ended, once we got all the collections games that we were going to get, then, you know, the third parties took over for a bit. We saw some other HD ports of collections like the Final Fantasy X HD, X and X2 HD remasters on here. And then again, like the indies just kind of took over from there with stuff like Bloodstained, Root Letter, and just so many RPGs and JRPGs that came after that. Like, you could literally just look up underrated JRPG for the PS Vita and you would just be, you know, meted with a wellspring of games. Like, there's so many amazing RPGs and JRPGs on this system. Beyond RPGs and JRPGs, again, the indie scene is absolutely amazing out here. One game I want to give a shout out to is Age of Zombies. If you haven't played that one before, it's a goofy little game, but it's a twin-stick shooter and it's a lot of fun. And the PS Vita, it's a shame that it couldn't be supported more, but I'm glad that it was supported for as long as it was at the very least, and I'm glad that the indie scene and the homebrew community has not only supported it for so long, but has been keeping it alive to this day, and I cannot recommend the Vita enough. You know, no matter... No, like, whether you're looking for PSP games, PS Vita games, or looking to emulate other games, like, I don't even like Game Boy Advance, you can do it all on the Vita. This is, like, one of the ultimate handhelds, in my opinion. And, other games that I wanted to mention that are just kind of randomly coming into my mind at this time, The Wolf Among Us and the Walking Dead games, like the Telltale ones, again, you can play those on here, so those are perfect for just laying in bed. We had, like, the Minecraft, it was, like, literally the PS3 and 360 version, but on here, and it was called the PS Vita edition, so... yeah, the PS Vita, definitely one of my favorite handhelds of all time. It's hard for me to choose a favorite handheld out of all the ones we talked about, but man, the PS Vita, if you're looking for a way to play PSP or PS Vita games, or even a way to emulate other games like I was saying, man, the PS Vita, you can't go wrong with it. It is truly one of the most ultimate handhelds.